Hello there, everyone. Welcome to the Real Life Process Podcast. I am so excited to be back with you this week to talk about all things real life, real self, real work. And I have an amazing guest with me today. I'm so excited to have my new friend, because we haven't known each other all that long, Dr. Ellen Wong. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Teresa. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, it's going to be fun. And we have such similar spaces. We met through a mutual friend of ours, Mike Kim. And I'm trying to think, was it October or was it earlier than that? I can't remember which event we met at. But I wanted to have you on the podcast today to hear about your expert authority in this word of happiness. So, we're going to talk about happiness today, but also about some upcoming events that you have that I'm going to get to be a part of. And so I was excited about that. And I want our audience to know about that. So tell us a little bit about yourself, the work you do, and how you got into this particular topic of happiness.
Yeah. So my background and my training is as a naturopathic doctor, and I always knew I wanted to go into healthcare because I wanted to help people feel better. And I think growing up in a very traditional setting, when you think about that, it's like you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a teacher, right? Like it's just there's I mean we can dive into like cultural things. It's like a whole other podcast on its own, but and so I kind of like I always knew I wanted to help people feel better, and to me that was going to be through the lens of being a doctor. I chose naturopathic medicine because I really like the philosophy around it, which has a lot to do with the fact that we're we're connected as an entire human body. And so when you come in and you tell me that your digestion is off, yeah, we're going to look at that, but we're going to look at all the other things that affect your digestion, including your sleep, your hormones, your mood, like all of these things. And so I really like the approach that there's a lot of focus on kind of mind body connection.
Mm-hmm.
As I progressed through my career, I ended up working a lot with women, especially with anxiety and depression, because that was something that I was experiencing a lot of in my life. And what really sort of tipped the scale into this happiness world was that I was really going through um, a very bad phase of my life, and I was on anti-anxiety medication. I was on antidepressant medication because I felt like I couldn't even do the things, like, it was so bad that I couldn't actually do the things that I knew my training taught me how to do. So, like, how to eat well, like, mindfulness things, like, exercise, like, I just couldn't actually get out of the house. I couldn't actually get out of bed, and it was turning into a massive problem, obviously, with, someone who teaches for a living, and, like, I teach as a professor and also have my own clinic, like, it was just turning into a bit of a problem. And so I remember seeing my family doctor. I was prescribed the medication. It got me to the point where I could then do the things that I know from my own training, like eating better and, the things that I've already mentioned, exercising, mindfulness. And sort of that critical moment was when I was now at a point where I could wean off my conventional medication. And it's interesting because in medicine, if you if you get your blood tests, or if you go in and get diagnosed with something like anxiety and depression, where you measure on a scale, like on a questionnaire, as long as you check off the right boxes and things come back okay, you are dismissed, as in, like, you have a clean bill of health. Like,
Right.
you're not measuring like you are sick, therefore you are healthy. And it was a very critical moment for me when I realized, like, yes, I guess I am not sick. But when I say the word healthy, there is an image that we all have. It's typically somebody who's like vibrant, they're energetic, they're like excited, about the world, and they're like happy about their days. Like there's this image and this energy that we all think of when we think of somebody
Mm-hmm.
who's very healthy. I was not that. All I was doing was measuring technically okay on all of these whatever lab
Mm-hmm.
values and questionnaires. And I remember telling my doctor, like, Like, I feel like I should be happy, because he was very much like, "Well, you're good," and I'm like, "I'm not good," and he's like, "What do you mean you're not good?" I was like, "Well, I don't feel good," and he's like, "But you're fine because we measured everything and you're fine," and I'm
Right.
like, "But I am not," and so it was like this really awkward, like, we're not on the same page here.
I
Um,
love that
and
that brought you to that moment, though, to ask that question of, but I'm not happy.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
like,
where
it
did
was
that
like
lead you when you got to that part, Ellen? Where did that take you in this journey to go, now this is what I talk about and this is what I share? Because that was a pivotal moment.
mhm, it
Where did
was, and
that
I
take you?
because the doctor told me that day, like, I remember saying, like, "Oh, I'm not happy," and he's like, "Well, you know what they say, happiness comes from within," and then just kinda, like, told me to rebook if I needed anything. And I remember going home and just sitting on the couch of my boyfriend's condo, like my boyfriend at that time. And I was like sitting there and just like stared into space for about like 6 hours, really, because I'm like, what does that actually mean? Like, what does it mean when people say happiness comes from within? Because I honestly didn't know. Like, if I had to sit
Mhm,
down and get really practical about it, I didn't know what that meant. And so I, as one does when one needs help, we Google things.
mhm.
And then, and so really what this ended up doing was like, I was like, we actually don't know. Like, we actually, why is it that happiness is one of the most fundamental human desires and goals, and no one actually knows how to be happy? Like, we don't have an
Well,
actual
and we don't
thing,
know
like
how to measure it. So when I
mhm,
heard you speak last October, you and I both spoke and did some workshops at the same event with Mike. And, you had this whole way, we don't have time to go into it all today on the podcast, obviously. But you talked about then if happiness is something that's attainable, how would we know?
mhm.
So I want to ask you that, like, if it's something that's attainable, um, how is it possible? What would we know that I have an internal, and you and I both use the same language for many things, but I have an internal happiness that then actually shows externally. What would you share about that?
One of the, one of the things that I actually think we live most of our life with is the idea that happiness feels like this esoteric, wishy-washy thing that just we sort of stumble upon once we reach all of our goals. And the fact is what I learned through the years, through, my own research, and I have a research background, so I remember doing a lot of research on that. I've traveled on purpose to some of the world's happiest countries to
I
understand
love that.
what makes them different than we are in North America. And what I learned is that happiness is actually a very intentional thing. There are specific things that you can attend to in your life that, if you did choose to do so, there is no other outcome than to feel happier. And so when I created this 9 pillars of happiness, I mean, some of the pillars, like the word happiness is an acronym for all of the things that I think we need to attend to, and the H stands for health. And I think, to me, that's a very basic one. Like, we have to be healthy and we have to take care of our health. And the
Mm-hmm.
one that I know you and I speak a lot about is one of the P's in happiness, which is productivity.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I went to Bhutan, which is this company that's teeny tiny and it's like nestled in the Himalayan mountains. Um, they have something called the Gross National Happiness Index, and they use it to measure the happiness of its citizens, kind of like how we have a census in Canada. I don't know if you have a census in the States. Is it similar?
Yes, we
Yeah.
do.
So they
Every
use
10
something.
years or so. It's
Oh,
it's not very
okay.
often.
No, no, 10 years. No, it's not very often. But like they have something similar, but instead of using a census, they use a national happiness index. And they talked about this idea about um people who feel like they are in control of their time feel happier. And so it was an interesting thing for me because productivity was something that I had always found interesting. It was something that I, sort of nerded out about a lot.
Hmm.
And I realized, I was like, oh, we have this all wrong. Like, it's not about, and I know you agree with this, Teresa, it's like it's not about doing as much as you can in the least amount of time. Like, that is not actually what it should be about. And so I remember I sort of got lost track of your question. I'm sorry, but like I feel like what ended up happening was in through my journey and my travels, I started realizing like happiness is actually, there's a way to it. We've just never
There's a
talked about
path.
it.
There's a
Yes.
path to it. And
Yes.
as you mentioned, your nine, nine pillars as it goes through the word of happiness, and that you identify all of those. You talked about health. You talked about one of the P's is productivity. And
Yeah.
that is where, you and I have some similar ways of looking at, time and
Mhm.
it not being about how much can we get done, but looking at what are the things that we're doing and are they the valuable things
Mhm.
that we would want to be doing with our time? Are they what matters?
Yeah.
But you're getting ready. The reason that I wanted to have you on as well is to introduce you to my audience because I think it's a very intriguing topic to just say, what is happiness? Like
Mm.
how can we measure it? How can we get there? I did the same thing when I was talking about live from rest to not rush. Well, what is rest? Because
Yeah.
we talk about it all the time. We know we need
Yeah.
it, but what is it really? And how would I know? I hate to say when we've arrived, right? But how would we
Mhm.
know when we're living in a state of happiness? As your doctor said, all the health, all the little lab work comes out that you should be happy, but I'm not.
Right.
And I feel the same way. People say, well, I'm living all the right things, so I should feel rested, but I don't.
Right.
I should feel peace. I should feel rest.
Right.
So you and I both have these similar ways of saying, how can we help simplify this down to say, this
Yeah.
is tangible, this is doable? And I know one of the ways you're going to do that is through a virtual summit that you're going to be hosting. And so
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about the summit, why you're doing it, who's invited, who's it for. Give us all the details on the summit.
Yeah, so one of the things that I realized that I is, I guess, in a somewhat cheesy and corny way, this idea of happiness is now like a
Hmm.
life mission of mine. And
That's not
I
cheesy or
no.
corny, by the way.
My self-judgment here. Um, I honestly feel like happiness is one of the most underutilized tools of positive impact in the world,
Mm.
and I really want to change that. Um, so when I started down this journey of really, um I know a lot of your audience is going to resonate with this, but when you've maybe potentially had a career or a profession, something that you've identified yourself with for a very long time and you're pivoting into
Hmm.
something, it can feel a bit nerve-wracking. And so I know, Teresa, you must work with coaches who have had other professions and other careers and now they're pivoting into
Absolutely.
this
The
world. And
transition, and when
yeah,
you put your stake in the ground, which I know you're in the process of doing, and saying, I think this is my life work.
yeah,
I think this is what I feel the most passionate about. This is a problem that I
yeah,
want to help solve,
yeah,
to help people know what happiness is, what it means, how it's obtainable, what are the nine pillars of those things.
yeah,
Yeah, that can
yeah,
be a pretty pivotal moment
yeah.
in
And
a
so
career transition. So, absolutely,
yeah.
I get it.
So my whole idea behind running a summit is, I don't know, like kickstarting that mission, which is the
Yeah,
fact that I think we need to get the word out there. Like the idea that honestly, truly, every single human being wants to be happy. Every decision we make revolves around that sensation, however we describe it. I think you used the word earlier, and I agree, like the sense of peace, contentment, like, fulfillment. These are things that every human being
it's a
wants.
longing and a desire.
Yes,
It's
yes,
a longing. I mean, because it's almost like we're reaching for it. And
Mhm.
is it tangible? And you and I
Yes.
both believe that it is.
Yes. And I
Contentment,
want to.
peace, happiness,
Yeah.
we could describe it in lots of different words, but
Yep.
it's a desire for an internal
Yep. Yep.
feeling, sensation that we have.
Yep.
Um,
And so
and
the
you
ha
and I
the
have
the
talked
summit
about
that oh,
this,
sorry.
right? You and I have talked about it. It doesn't mean that we're not going to. I think sometimes people think, oh, if we're really going to go to happiness, we're going to be like, in this Zen state all the time. That's not true. You and I are both very productive people
Mhm.
who move forward. And this summit is something that you're doing that is very much saying, this is what I want to have my
Yep.
life work
Yep.
around. So, how
And
are
I
you
wanna
setting this up? What's the experience going to be?
yeah, like, I think, to answer your previous question, it's like I really wanna get the world out there because I think happiness is actually a very practical thing. I mean, we can actually talk about some ROI on people who are happy, and I
Hmm.
think, like, if it's one, that fundamental human desire and longing, like you said, and two, it's extremely practical to experience, then let's get the message out there. Let's talk about how to make it practical. And so when we kick off the summit, I'm going to be introducing these 9 pillars of happiness, what they are. And then what I've done is interviewed experts in each of the pillars. And of course, I was very excited to have you join us to talk about this idea of productivity. And so the whole point of the summit is to just bring awareness to each of these pillars. And I think the really great thing about it is that, and I know there's a lot of perfectionist people probably in your world too, as in mine. You don't have to nail all 9 pillars. The
Yeah.
whole idea of happiness is that it is a fluctuating thing. Life will throw crap at you sometimes, and you will veer away from happiness. And the point isn't to stay happy all the time because that's really weird, right? And so the idea is when life challenges you in different ways, you have ways to bring yourself back into this zone of happiness. And that's what those 9 pillars do. And so as we take people through the summit, you will get specifically curated videos, expert interviews. And the idea is you can always go back and revisit these when you feel like one of these pillars is off. That's why I
I
introduced
love
the
that.
9 pillars at the
I
beginning.
love the measurability of saying there are these 9 things. And when in feeling off, I could almost do a check in with
Yep.
myself around these. And now you're creating the content, even that will give some conversation to those. I heard you speak about these back in October, and now you're bringing them kind of to life, so to speak,
Mhm.
through the summit. And you're going to be walking through. How will people be able to access the summit? How will they? You said that you could go back and watch them again. So, how can my audience be involved in this summit and knowing these 9 pillars and getting this great content?
Yeah, so the summit is completely free to sign up.
Ooh,
There will be an opportunity on the sign up page to get lifetime access to the videos and bonus material that I'm putting out along with these videos. And so you can look forward to having, I want to say, at least 15 videos
wow.
to get access to over the span of a week. And again, there's no rush. You don't have to finish watching them all during that week. There will be an opportunity to get lifetime access. And I'm gonna drop the link to the summit with you, Teresa, if that's
Yes,
okay,
we'll
and then we
definitely put it
can
in our show
share.
notes. And of course, if you're following my content and part of my social media, I'll be promoting the summit and letting you know about it because I so believe in what Ellen is giving us in a very tangible way because this
Mhm.
happiness feels kind of intangible.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, I desire it. I look for it. I seek it. Where is it? How do I get
Mhm.
it? How do
Mhm.
I grasp it?
Mhm.
Um, Give me another, if you would, just to give a taste of. Do you mind kind of walking us through just briefly what each of the 9 pillars are so that as we come to the summit, we're kind of aware of what we're coming into? You
Yeah.
mentioned H being health.
Yep.
What is the
The
A?
rest of them? Yeah. So H stands for health. A is authenticity. It's about how do we
Mm,
live an authentic life true to our needs and wants. The first P stands for purpose, which is about, meaningful, fulfilling activities and things that we can engage in where we give back and feel like we are leaving a positive impact in the world. Productivity, you and I talked a lot about use of
Mm-hmm.
time and what that looks like, and I'm super excited for the audience to hear your gems in that interview. The I in happiness stands for inner peace. It's really
Mm.
dealing with the thoughts that come to our mind, and we all have them, and it's not normal to have negative
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, but then how do we deal with it? And I brought on a fellow naturopathic doctor, but she's also a compassionate inquiry
Oh,
practitioner,
wow.
and it really like she's really going through some steps about how do we practice compassion with
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. Then the N stands for nature, which I got a little bit creative with this one because I feel like we all know we're supposed to spend time in nature, and that helps our happiness. But I actually brought in an interior designer, and she's going to
Oh,
talk about
wow.
how to bring nature indoors so that we can create a sense of happiness within our home and our office.
Environment is so important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, that'll be a good one.
Yeah, and then emotional intelligence and mastery. Dr. Eugene Choi, he's coming in and
Mm,
speaking a little bit about kind
wow.
of our brain science and its relation to positive and negative emotions. Um, the first S is social connection. So I'm bringing in someone to speak about community and how do we create that within in our circles, and and then the last S is sustainability. And the my take on sustainability, of course, I think from an environmental global perspective, we all have our part to play. But Brooke is actually, she's an executive coach, and she's going to come in and speak about making sustainable decisions for ourselves, like
Mm.
personal sustainability. So
So
yeah,
you
and
can see as
mhm,
Ellen talks how much we have in common.
mm,
She talked about the needs and the wants. And we actually have an assessment that we do and that we have online where people can look and see what are their needs, what how they've been uniquely designed with unique needs. And sustainability is one of the things that we talk about.
love it.
And how do we stay in this cycle and this pattern over time? Because as we create, and you and I both have talked about this, behaviors and rhythms and routines that keeps our happiness level, our contentment, our longing and desires at a different state when we can create those patterns.
Hmm.
But some of the people that you're bringing in for this summit sound amazing. I'm super excited to get all the videos and see all the things. And thank you for walking us through the 9 pillars, because I think that will help the audience know that, gosh, this is something that I want to see. This is something that I want to watch. So, how long is the summit, Ellen?
It's going to be 5 days. So March
Okay.
20th to March 24th. I actually
Okay.
very specifically and intentionally picked March 20th to kick off the summit because it's the International Day of Happiness as declared by the
Oh, wow.
UN. I know happiness is actually so important that the UN like has a whole day dedicated to
I
it,
love that we have countries in the world that measure happiness.
right?
And it was interesting when you were talking earlier, you go, outside of North America, like, it's just opening up your mind to the globe and to
Mm,
across the globe, just the desire. We're all human beings, doesn't matter where we live or what we do.
yeah.
Um, but that you've traveled to some of these places and you've really done the research to say, what what do these people have that
Hmm.
helps them be so happy or
Hmm.
rate higher on the happiness scale?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So where else did you travel? Where else have you been that you looked
I've
at
done a
those
lot of the
things?
Nordic countries. They
Okay.
frequently rank in the top 10 almost every
Hmm.
year, of countries that rank high in happiness. And it's so funny. Like there's this sort of iconic picture. I want to say it's in Denmark. It's a restaurant,
Hmm.
and outside the restaurant, there's all these um, baby prams, like baby like strollers, and they all have babies in it. So in Denmark, it is parents, and there's a societal belief that it's really important for kids to get fresh air and all that kind of stuff, but it is also completely safe. Like just you're you're in the restaurant, the parents are eating and they're having their tea or their brunch or their lunch or whatever it is, and the baby is outside in their stroller, just, kind of hanging out with all the other babies. And I just look at that and I'm like,
Wow.
the level of trust
Yes,
that they
that's the
have
word.
in each other is just phenomenal. Because if you try to leave your child in a stroller outside a restaurant in North America, like the police are coming. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
if just it's like a whole different level, and they just have a different belief. Like their idea of work-life boundaries and work-life balance is very different from ours. And the idea that one should be spending time outdoors and that is facilitated, and there's the city design is around green spaces. Like they just think about things a little bit differently, and they're living a lot more at peace and
Hmm.
feeling a lot happier, and
Hmm.
the connection, like the
Whereas
social connection, right?
so many of us, I would say here in North America, as we're kind of comparing the two, um, we're looking to see what's making someone else happy.
Mm,
So many of the times, whether that's through the social media feeds we're reading, or we're looking to see what's making someone else happy, and then we're doing that
mhm,
rather than the internal of, where do I find happiness, where do I find peace, because we're each uniquely created and designed differently. But when
mhm.
a culture and an environment creates an environment where we can lean into that, wow, what a difference that
Yeah.
would make. So I'm really excited about the one you're talking about, the environment, because I'm such a person of environment. Before we started recording today, I was talking about, and if you're watching us on YouTube, you'll see I work out of a co working space. And part of the reason is the environment that's created here gives me happiness. It brings
Mhm,
me joy. Just the wood and the brick and the richness of it. And yet also the community of people. And so we're
mhm,
each uniquely designed and
mhm.
have different needs and wants, as you said.
Yeah.
And discovering that for ourselves is really how happiness comes. It's not
Yeah.
through, oh, I saw somebody else doing this. This what must be what will make me
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah. And Robert and Kaylee, we've met
Hmm.
them together before. They're actually going to come and speak about happy relationships.
Oh,
I
wow.
have someone coming in talking about creating a happy relationship with food, because I know food is a wrestle that a lot of people have in their lives. And so we're having somebody come in and talk about that. We have somebody coming in and talk about finding happiness after grief.
Mm.
She's gone through quite the roller coaster in her life too. And so how did she find happiness after that? So I feel like I really want to bring together people who can offer different perspective and different aspects of happiness.
And I,
Hmm.
as you're talking about all these different people, it just reminds me, and as your nine pillars, happiness doesn't come through one thing.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
not one, oh, if I just did this, I'd be happy.
Hmm.
It's actually all of these things together,
Yeah.
that are measurable, tangible things that we can look at.
Hmm.
And so I'm super excited about this summit. I'm super excited to be a part of it. And we will have all the information in the show notes. And I am excited to introduce you to my audience, Ellen, and just, um, yeah, we're going to get to be together at different times and in different spaces. You were out with Mike a couple weeks ago, and I didn't get to be there, but I love that our paths have crossed, and
Hmm.
that we're able to kind of have that same message together. So thanks for being with me today and sharing about your summit. As I said, we'll have all the details. Anything else you want to share with our audience before we hop off today from this podcast? I think you're going to have to come back and we're going to have to talk more. But for today's podcast, anything else you want to share as we wrap up today?
Honestly, the first thing that comes to mind is that I really wanted to say thank you, because you're connecting me with your audience and you're helping me get the word out there. And I know how busy you are and how many things you are juggling and doing. And I feel like, as soon as I reached out to you, you're like, absolutely, like, what can I do to help? And I just really want to take an opportunity to
Uh,
say thank you and express my gratitude, because I think when you do work that you're very passionate about and you're trying to really get the word out there, it takes a community, and it takes people helping you spread the message. And I just wanted to say thank you
Oh, you're
for that.
welcome, friend. You have a great message to share. Besides the summit that we'll share all the details on, and those of you that listen to the podcast and follow on social, you're going to get all the details. Where can people connect with you? What's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on Instagram, and so my handle is at the Joy Avenue. So you can connect with me on there. Otherwise, you can also contact me through, well, Instagram, LinkedIn, same thing, Joy Avenue, the Joy Avenue, and then also if you want to check out more work on happiness, then you can take a look at my website, which is drellenwong.com.
Yes. So, yeah, check out, get on her mailing list. She actually has some things that you can download for free to start at her website and probably in other places in social so that you can start to meet Dr. Ellen and get to know all about happiness. And thank you so much for coming and having this conversation with me today. One of many that I think we'll be having along the way. It's been so fun to connect with you over the last 6 months. And I just love the work that you're doing, my friend.
Thank you, Teresa.
Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. And remember that every ordinary day has an extraordinary moment. You just have to look for them. We'll see you next week, everyone.